isn't true. There's truth to it. Like I sat here, in this seat and gradually became irritated by Victor Wembanyama. I became initially, a little bit irritated with the cheap shot nature of his game when he gets overly emotional and the way he would react to being overly emotional. And there were reasons why he was overly emotional. He was targeted by the opponents. He was beaten on night in and night out. I get that. But it started early. It started with, elbows that missed. I mean, if he'd connected on every cheap shot that he attempted in the postseason, there's no way they could have kept him eligible for every single game. When I started to say this, and it was probably after he nearly knocked out Naz Reid in the Minnesota series, I remember getting some pushback, and then it gradually, as you guys started to watch, some of you weren't watching, you're like, wow, he loses his cool, man. It hurts him. It hurts the team. But in the meantime, people were gushing over the skill, over the talent for somebody that size. And so was I. I absolutely was. But at the same time, it's just weird. You don't see this happen that quickly. You don't see the turn, the heel turn, at least perception-wise. And I don't view him as a true villain or a true heel. I don't think that's his intention. But it really did because the spotlight grew brighter as they got to the Western Conference Finals, as they were playing the defending champion, Oklahoma City Thunder. And then, of course, the spotlight is always brightest in the NBA Finals. The NBA is not that much different than what college basketball has become. And that is the focus of the masses, of the sports fan masses, happens in the biggest moments and in the biggest games. In college basketball, it's become, I hate this about the sport that I've loved forever, but it's become very much a 1 month focused sport. March Madness is where you get the casual sports fan interest. You don't get it during the regular season. And I know that college basketball ratings were actually up this year during the regular season, but still they pale in comparison to what they used to be. And when I say used to be, we're going back now more than a decade to when college basketball was a big deal in January and in February and even in November and December. It's not anymore. Again, we've talked about this so many times, but it's really, I think, a result of just the NFL's power and the NFL being just something that overshadows everything else in sports in this country. And the NFL becoming a year-round thing, but March has been carved out, even though NFL free agency is a big deal, and sometimes it gets in the way of those early round games. But for the most part, college basketball in March is this standalone product that the country still embraces, still loves. It still rates, no matter how ratings are figured out this day. You know that it is a pop culture event. The NBA is not that dissimilar. The NBA regular season is brutal, man. It is not a good product. Of course, it's subjective. That's my opinion. But the ratings would suggest the same thing. And then you get to the postseason and it changes. But in the NBA, unlike March Madness, it's a 2-month run, not a 1-month run. And really, the NCAA tournament is 3 weekends. You go from Selection Sunday, which isn't actually a playing weekend, and then it's first, second round, it's Sweet 16, Elite 8, and then it's Final Four national championship. It's condensed compared to the NBA playoffs that's spread out over 2 months. And so with the NBA, and they did very well ratings-wise in the finals. These were some of the highest-rated finals games in a long time on ABC. But really, when people start to tune in, it's the finals. So when people started to tune in to the finals, there was already this thing about Wemby being, oh, my God, he is going to be the greatest that's ever played the game. You've never seen anything like him. I was a part of that I was hyping it. I couldn't believe what I was watching in some of those games. You see it during the regular season, and you're like, okay, well, let's see what happens during the postseason. Different sport during the postseason. And he was spectacular at times. That game one that he had against Oklahoma City was breathtaking. Like, it was truly one of the most dominant performances you'll ever see in a postseason game. This is his first postseason, and he goes to the home of the defending champs for game one, and in double overtime, they beat the defending champs, and he ends up with 41 points, 24 rebounds, and 3 block shots. He was so dominant. I'm pulling up the box score just to see what the offensive rebound count was, because it was insane in how many minutes he played. So there would have been, 58 minutes in the game with 2 overtimes. He played 49 minutes of 58. He had 9 offensive rebounds out of his 24. 9 offensive rebounds. He also had 3 assists. Shot 14 of 25 from the field. 12 of 13 from the free throw line. And in that game, he only shot 2 threes and was 1 for 2. So after that game one, people are like, oh my God. And then we started to see, when things got chippy, when he got targeted, when things got rough, when things didn't go his way, he ran at Caruso. Literally took a dead sprint at midcourt and ran him over. Cheap. He lifted his left arm up on Hartenstein and knocked his jaw into next week. And then we get to the finals, and we get the ridiculous no call with the Brunson situation in game 2. Was that game 2? Maybe game 3, when he throws Brunson to the ground. And then we get what we got the other night, which absolutely was dirty and may have cost him game 6, had there been a game 6. In the meantime, he is, running his mouth about how, he's in the heads of Mitchell Robinson and Karl Anthony Towns, and they got a 20-something point lead, and they blow it. And then you add the game itself. It's like, wow, not super polished offensively. What's he doing bringing the ball up court? What's he doing trying to beat people off the dribble 5 feet beyond the three-point line and then firing up threes? Why is somebody 7'5" doing that? And then when the games got tight in the finals, where is he at the end of the game? Completely disappeared. The narrative, man, on him, wow, did it change, and change quickly. But like I said yesterday, 22, be patient, things change. They almost always do. And I think almost everything about Victor Wembanyama, the basketball game itself, his game, his personality, his attitude, all of that will evolve, will change. Because I think the one thing I've realized about watching him and then listening to him, he's actually intelligent. There's some self-awareness. He's immature. There's no doubt about that. But a lot of 22-year-olds are immature. But Kevin, you're right about the exit. That, if I made a big deal about that, I know I didn't make as big of a deal about that as I did everything else, including, putting his foot down in the landing spot of Jalen Brunson and looking to see if Brunson's foot landed on his foot. That I thought was intentional. I thought it was legitimately intentional. I think he was trying to really potentially injure Jalen Brunson. There were multiple times during this postseason where it went beyond just physical play. It went beyond just responding competitively and fiercely. It went to trying to hurt somebody. And that's got to stop, because it'll only hurt him and his team. But yeah, in terms of not shaking hands, I think for me, ultimately, it's just another thing that added to the turn in how people perceived Wemby over basically a 10-day period. It was kind of amazing to watch. I was thinking about something with New York's win this morning because it's been the case here for the last few years. This was a sport that basically relied, the NBA did, on dynasties, long runs, and really top shelf rivalries. You have top shelf rivalries when you end up having teams that are really good, competing for championships and doing it over a sustained period of time. You go back to the 80s, obviously the Lakers and the Celtics, but it wasn't just the Lakers and the Celtics. It was the Celtics and the 76ers. Then we get to, the later portion of the 80s into the 90s, and you've got Pistons, first it's Pistons, Celtics, then it's Pistons, Bulls, and, you had a little thing with Pistons, Lakers there as well. Then you get into, obviously, Bulls, Knicks, and Bulls against the rest of the league, but dynasty. Then you get Lakers, and yeah, there were a couple of, the Sacramento Kings series, but there wasn't a true rival, but it was a dynasty. The Spurs had a dynasty. And the Heat had a mini dynasty. Golden State obviously had a dynasty. But what we've gotten since 2019 is we have gotten 8 straight years of a different champion in a sport that never saw that. You got to go all the way back, literally, to like the 50s to find 8 straight different champions in the sport. In 2019, it was Toronto knocking off Golden State and keeping them from what would have been a three-peat and what would have been 4 titles in 5 years. Kevin Durant got hurt during that series. Kawhi Leonard was unbelievable during that series. Toronto won the championship. Then 2020, you kind of toss because it's the bubble, but the Lakers won. 2021, the Bucks won. 2022, the Warriors came back and won. 2023, the Nuggets won the title. 2024, the Celtics won the title. 2025, Oklahoma City won the title. And then this year, the Knicks won the title. And here's the other thing. We haven't seen, in the different winners, we haven't seen a rematch since Golden State Cleveland. It was Toronto over Golden State. It was the Lakers over the Heat. It was the Bucks over the Suns. It was the Warriors over the Celtics. It was the Nuggets over the Heat. It was the Celtics over the Mavericks. It was OKC over Indiana. It was the Knicks over San Antonio. 8 straight years of a completely different matchup from the year before with a completely different winner from the year before. The question is this good for the NBA? Because this is what we get. This is what the NFL is designed to be, even though we haven't gotten a lot of it because we had a dynasty with the Patriots. We actually had 2 iterations of a Patriots dynasty, and we had a mini dynasty with the Kansas City Chiefs. But the NFL is designed for everybody to have a chance. And with everybody having a chance and without a behemoth in the sport, some people say it's not great, even though that's the design. That's the design because every owner wants it designed that way because they want to have a chance. The Washingtons and the Sacramentos and the, Utahs of the NBA, they want a chance too. But for years, they didn't have a chance. The last 8 years would suggest that the league has provided teams with a better opportunity to break out of the pack. But is it good for the sport that we've got a different champion every year? That right now we don't have an intense rivalry in the NBA. If you want to say that Oklahoma City, San Antonio is a budding rivalry, okay. Do you know that really when this postseason began, you did get the Sixers and the Celtics, but that's not a recent rivalry. That's a distant rivalry. The rivalry of recent vintage in terms of the series matchups during this postseason. And this is laughable because most of you would have no idea that this has actually been a rivalry. But the Denver Minnesota series was a third time matchup in the postseason, and there were some real ill feelings between the teams. And it was chippy, it was physical. It was a great series. Great series. Denver was injured. Injuries have really had a big part in the last 8 winners. You know, if you go back, first of all, Kawhi leaves Toronto after 2019. The bubble, nobody cares. Giannis gets hurt after the Bucks win it. The Warriors win it the next year. They're old. The Nuggets haven't been completely healthy since winning the title. The Celtics haven't been healthy since winning the title. And Oklahoma City came back this year, and you could argue they were missing clearly their second best offensive and defensive player in the Western Conference Finals, but they were missing more than that during the postseason. You know, the Knicks could be a one-off just like everybody else has been recently. Now, the others have been one-offs more so because of injuries or departures. So there's no predicting injuries in sports. If the Knicks stay healthy, they're a good enough team to run it back or to certainly have a chance to run it back. But maybe they get hurt and it's their turn to get hurt. Who knows? The question that I have, and I'm just curious, you know, in the NBA specifically, is it better to have it be what it's been over the last 8 years? A different winner, a different matchup every year. No dynasties, no real rivalries, but everybody has a chance. And it made the postseason more dramatic. I think it's made the postseason more dramatic in recent years because when Golden State and Cleveland, you know, were going head to head over those 4 consecutive years, it was like preordained. It's like, yeah, we're watching these early round series, but let's just get to the finals. It's going to be Golden State and Cleveland. It's not that anymore. It just isn't. I actually really thought Oklahoma City was going to repeat this year. I thought they were really good, really good. And I have a feeling they are going to be right back in the mix next year and maybe end up being a champion where you have 2 winners, team win 2 within 3 years. I think they've got a really good chance. But is this, wide open nature to the NBA playoffs better or worse than the dynasty, the dominance, the rivalries that come with dynastic runs, even though in those postseasons, it's like, yeah, but we're going to just get to Cleveland and Golden State. We're going to get to the Heat and the Spurs. We're going to get to the Lakers and the Celtics eventually. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. It works in the NFL, even though we've had dynastic runs, with the sport that is most built to create parity. It's ironic that we've had, 3 dynasties in this century. The Patriots have had 2 of them, and the Chiefs have had 1. Because the sport is not designed to be that. Although what's happened in that sport is if you end up having the best quarterback or certainly one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks, you've got a chance and a better chance than anybody else has to win every year. Hockey, has always been sort of random, and yet we've had, Florida in recent years make runs. Now, this year was different, but we had a Carolina team that was one of the better teams going in win it. Baseball, man, it's kind of random because these series are so short. It's a 162-game season, and anything can happen in a best 3 of 5 or best 4 or 7. These are short sprints in the postseason compared to the way the sport is competed during the regular season. But in the NBA, dynasties or what we have right now, which is who knows who's going to emerge as next year's winner. 301-230-0980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the team980.com. So you're telling me Brandon Ayuk put something out at 2:08 this morning on Instagram?
No.
Weighing in at
he weighed in
what?
at 2:08. He put it out sometime this morning. I'm not exactly sure what time.
What did he put out? He just stated that he was weighing in at 2:08.
No, he posted a video of him stepping on the scale, and it weighed him at 2:08. So I think he's telling everybody that he is in playing shape because his ESPN listed weight is 200. This Instagram story was about an hour ago.
Okay. Well, that's the first, video or social media post that has something to do with football and the importance of people knowing his physical conditions. So is that just netted out for me? Would that be somebody that you would deem to be in shape to play football or not?
I mean, he is shirtless in this video, and he is defined, and he weighs 2:08. His ESPN listed weight is 200, so he appears to be in playing shape. It's just a matter of now how that knee is. So I guess we'll see.
Well, and how the mind is.
That too, more than anything.
So he also posted something that said he was in Virginia yesterday?
Yeah, his Instagram story yesterday, he posted that he was in Virginia. But on Instagram, you can post a location without actually being there. So it leads a lot of people to speculate: Is he actually in Virginia? Is this just what he's fiddling with the Niners, trying to make them think he's in Virginia or something like that? I don't know.
God, I have so much Brandon Ayuk fatigue right now.
You and everyone else, brother.
I mean, it's like if I didn't do what I do here every day, I would not be paying attention to it, and I would just say, tell me who's on the roster when we get to Philly week 1.
It'd be a muted word on Twitter.
Oh, it is. By the way, real quickly, and I'm going to get to your calls, and we do have a phone line or two open if you want to weigh in on the question, which is, in the NBA, do you prefer the era of dynasties, which usually includes much bigger rivalries, but it also includes this sort of, you get to the postseason and we're just waiting for the matchup of the two best teams that are going to meet again like Golden State and Cleveland did for 4 years? Or do you like the way it is now, where we've now had 8 different matchups and 8 different winners over the last 8 seasons? I'll give you my answer in a moment if you want to weigh in. 301-230-0980. What was I going to say? Where were we? We were on Ayuk.
We were on Ayuk, and then we transitioned back to basketball.
Yeah. What I was going to say is I thought it was really interesting what Grant Cohn from San Francisco told us on Friday, that right now the process for him is not as easy as just showing up. Like when training camp begins, it's not like he can just show up and then the 49ers are forced to either, release him or take him off the reserve left squad list. He has to apply for reinstatement. Now, he should be doing that. He should do that. I can't imagine the form's very difficult to fill out, but he has to apply for reinstatement first. And then the 49ers can actually make a decision based on the reinstatement decision. And he thought the 49ers may try to haggle more money out of him. We'll see. All right. Yeah. Ayuk. Fatigue. Anthony in D.C. Anthony, dynasties or what we've had for the last 8 years, a different winner each year, a different matchup each year?
So, Kevin, before I answer your question, if you indulge me for a second.
Sure.
So, George Clinton once said that the bigger the headache, the bigger the pill.
Yeah.
So, who is the big pill to Brandon Ayuk's potential big headache? Because that's going to be a constant. If what we think is going to happen happens, that's going to be a constant theme for the season, however long it lasts with him.
Ask the question again. I'm not sure I really understood the question.
Who is going to be the big pill to Brandon Ayuk's potential big headache?
Like who's going to solve the headache?
who's going to be? Yeah,
Who's going to be
solve
the
it? Who's
migraine
gonna be-
medication that calms him down
Are
and
you implying
says
that that's
we're
our
good?
quarterback, Anthony?
I don't want
Then
it to be him.
it's probably Jaden, right?
I don't want it to be him.
Yeah.
It has to be somebody else. Jaden Daniels does not need that headache. See that?
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
that's
I'd rather him not have to be kind of, a quarterback coming off an injury-riddled season and also have to be a babysitter to a friend on the team. I'm with you on that. So they have to
Okay.
make sure that that's not what he becomes. And by the way, he would be the pill. He would be the medication because he's the guy in DC that we assume Brandon trusts and is the guy that is driving Brandon's activity related to wanting to play here and nowhere else.
That's
Right.
true in theory, but somebody else needs to be behind the scenes handling that situation thoroughly.
Wes Welker.
But whoever it is, anybody but Jaden.
All right, back to the NBA question.
Right, your question at hand. As I was telling Max, everything has a shelf life. You have your dynasty era, and then people all of a sudden they get tired of the same team or teams being the ones fighting for the championship.
Well, we've never had this happen, though. Never in the history of the league. This isn't cyclical. This is a first time. It's always been dynastic.
Yeah, but the thing is, people eventually get tired of Cleveland, Golden State, the Sixers, and
not everybody gets tired of that.
LA.
That's why I'm asking the question. Which do you prefer?
Well, to me, it has its run. I enjoy it for a while.
Okay.
But then I get tired of seeing it.
Okay. You and I are basically the same age. We both have our whole lifetime of watching the NBA playoffs have been watching, dynastic teams in the championship series, winning championships and having big rivals along the way. Sometimes it being the rival is the team they're facing in the finals from the other conference. But what we've gone through now for 8 seasons is something that's totally unprecedented in this league. A league that's been built on dynasties and rivalries now has been wide open for 8 years. By the way, wide open would be an exaggeration because it's not like all 30 teams have a chance. It's not even like 15 teams have a chance. But nobody had the Knicks before this season started. Nobody had Oklahoma City last year versus Indiana. I think people thought the Celtics certainly were going to win a series, but nobody had Dallas in those finals. Remember, they made those, the trades in midseason to turn their whole season around. So, I didn't give you my answer. My answer is I actually, in this sport, prefer this. Because my team now, I have this vision that they could rise into the level of having a chance to win it. Because remember the teams, Anthony, that I actually really liked. The John Wall, Bradley Beal, Trevor, Nene, Gortat teams. I knew that there was a limit. The limit was Eastern Conference Finals because there was no chance they could beat Cleveland in a best of 7. Or the Heat, before that, when in the first part of that, they had no chance of doing that. So now, if next year the Wizards are in the Eastern Conference playoffs after, let's just say, a 47 or a 48 win year with Anthony Davis playing a lot of games, it's going to feel different in the postseason. So I think I like this better.
I understand what you're saying. But when you look at the overall picture, because teams won't be able to sustain their rosters, this might be a trend for a while. And over the course of time, people will eventually get tired of this trend and they will pine for the dynasties.
Yeah.
Eventually, the dynasties will come back. the dynasties will have their stretch of a run.
We'll see.
And eventually, people will get tired
because
of
what we've just
That's
seen never made an appearance until 2019 and this run. This league was always about dynastic runs. I mean, you really have to go back. You've got to go back to really, I mean, the 70s was, you had, obviously in the early 70s, you still had the Celtics, you had the Lakers, you had the Knicks. And then we got into, a run of, believe it or not, our team, the Washington Bullets, making 3 finals appearances in 6 years. The 76ers were considered to be, a team that should have won multiples. But yeah, and then immediately in 1980, we started with Lakers Celtics. Yeah.
Yeah, the aberration was Portland, because it was Portland, then us for 2 years, then Seattle for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then the
Us against
Sixers
Seattle for
and
2
the
years.
Lakers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sixers, Lakers.
But it still wasn't an
Lakers.
8-year run.
Yeah. No, it wasn't an 8-year run, but I still
actually,
believe...
you know what? It was an 8-year run. My fault. It was. The 70s are the last time it was that. Nobody repeated during that decade. Nobody repeated.
Okay.
I mean, Boston won 3 in the decade. All right. Boston won 3 during the decade, but none of them were repeats. None of them were.
Right.
All right. I got to go. Thanks, Anthony. Yep. Appreciate it as always. Let's go to Robert in Annapolis. Robert, the NBA's turned into much more of a parity league. 8 different winners, 8 different matchups over the last 8 seasons. Do you prefer this or what we had for a long period of time, which was dynasties and rivalries, even though the finals typically were kind of preordained when the playoffs began?
Well, good morning. I'd like to remind you the Bullets actually went to 4 finals in 9 years.
One of them was in Baltimore.
Of course, they were still Baltimore, but the same team, same players, essentially, to some degree.
Right.
Anyhow, when I followed the NBA, there were always dynasties. So that's really all I knew. And I certainly enjoyed it because once my team was eliminated, then, you had these root against situations, whether you were rooting against the Celtics or the Lakers or whoever it was back in those days. But the thing about the NBA that differentiates from the other sports is the focus now is really on players, individual players, and not teams. For example, LeBron James was the marquee guy for so many years, but, he was with, at least 3 different teams. So whatever team he was on, he carried along with him. So that was really the focus. And question for you, Wemby, has there ever been a player that this would maybe be a topic for conversation or call-in, a player that you soured on? So based on what I've heard, I didn't really watch these finals, but I know you do, that you soured on so quickly, and not in terms of his abilities and his talents and all that, but just sort of your opinion that sort of did a 180 over a couple of weeks.
I know it's happened.
Griffin,
I know
Robert
it's happened,
Griffin
but nothing's popping into mind right now. And by the way, let me be clear. It's not that I've soured so much on Wemby that I dislike him, because that's not true. There's a lot I do like about him, but man, we went from he was elevated at a level so quickly that I can't remember, and literally within a 10-day period, it's a completely different conversation about him. Not just
I'm really
me.
Talking about I'm really talking about your admiration for him in terms of everything, because you were one of the salesmen on him early on. But like Robert Griffin, there's a perfect example.
That's a good one.
That was very quickly beloved, and then did he go in a different direction? That's
a 30 for 30. Now, Robert, comparing the skill and the talent level to what Wemby is in the NBA, it's not even close, right? Wemby is an absolute unicorn. Robert had major limitations as a player, major limitations, even when he was having great success as a rookie. And I think we all saw what those limitations were because of the style of football the Shanahans were forced to play. But that style of football was extremely exciting, and he was great at it, in his rookie year. But yeah, there was so much. Yes, there was so much we didn't know behind the scenes, and I have a feeling there was a lot we didn't know about Wemby behind the scenes.
But again, I'm emphasizing your admiration, your opinion of it. Was Griffin his rookie year, the second? Wasn't his jersey the highest? Was he the highest selling jersey there for
absolutely? Yes.
Where those
number one
jersey
jersey
now, you know?
He was meteoric, from that season.
Yes,
he was a superstar.
That's my point.
Yeah.
But anyhow, there you go.
Yeah.
All right.
No. That would be the
done,
one, because I was all bought in, and then that off season, man, was everybody rushing to tell everybody in media the real story about him behind the scenes, and it was just startling.
All right.
All right.
Now that
Thanks,
the NBA
Robert.
is over, you can get back to the Brandon Ayuk saga.
Oh, Jesus. Everybody on hold, stay there. We'll do one more segment of the NBA has become a league of parity. It's not the same as the NFL parity, because it's not like everybody's got a chance. Half the teams don't even have a chance. There are 30 teams. Every year there's probably now maybe 5, 6, or 7 teams that have a chance. But that's different than what it used to be, when it was like 2 or 3 teams had a chance. We are out of the dynasty era in the NBA. 8 different winners over 8 seasons, 8 different matchups in the finals over 8 seasons. That following the Golden State era, the Miami Heat era, the Lakers era, the Bulls era, the Lakers Celtics era, etc. Which do you prefer? Dynasties, which usually bring more fierce rivalries with them, or what we've had for the last 8 years? 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Want to hear something crazy? In the 70s, there was a stretch of 10 straight years, 10 different champions. However, in the decade of the 1970s, you know which team went to the finals more than any other? The Bullets. 1 year in Baltimore, 3 in Washington. They played in 4 NBA championship finals during the 70s. Only won 1, but the Knicks went to 3 finals. Celtics 2, the 76ers 1. The Lakers 3, Seattle 2, and the Bucks 2. The Bucks were in the Western Conference back then. But nobody went to more NBA finals during the decade of the 1970s than an organization named the Bullets. 1 year in Baltimore, 3 in Washington. Pretty crazy. G, do you prefer dynasties and the dynasty era, or what we've had the last 8 seasons, a different winner every year?
I don't got no preference because I'm an NBA fan. I love it either way. I was birthed with the dynasty of the Bulls. I'm still a Bulls fan, but I didn't stop watching when Mike left. You know what I'm saying? I think it was good for the NBA when Greek Freak brought a championship back to Milwaukee. You know what I'm saying? I think it was great for the league when LeBron did go down to the Heat, and they was rock and roll stars for them couple years. I liked it. I think it was great for the league when LeBron went to LA. You know, I think it's great for the NBA all the time when New York Knicks is in the NBA conversation, because the excitement the New York City fans displayed was nothing but great publicity for the NBA. True basketball town, and people got to see the love of basketball that people had. You know what I'm saying? So I don't mind either way. Storylines and stars is the thing that keeps people locked in, and I think it introduced a lot of people that didn't know how good Jalen Brunson was that to see how good he is. And also, he won a championship with his daddy on the bench. You know what I'm saying? I was rooting for the Thunder to lose and not be a back-to-back champion. You know, I'm a fan of the NBA, so I really don't care. I think it's great for the NBA when them type of teams win, like the Knicks and the Lakers. I hate the Knicks because I'm a Bulls fan, but I was rooting for the Knicks to win because I think it's great for basketball in the NBA.
Yeah, you know, the numbers would say in terms of audience size over the years that not only star players but a star team is the biggest draw. A dynasty ends up being a bigger draw than the randoms. That's the wrong word, obviously, because the Knicks were really good and the Spurs were really good, but no one necessarily had them in the finals. My only I think the only reason that I slightly like what we've had here recently more than, you know, Golden State, Cleveland, Heat, etc., going back to the Bulls, is that it makes the games early in the postseason more than just, you know, great games and great competitions and trying to get to the next round. But there's a sense that if you do advance, you actually have a chance to win the whole thing. And when you've got dynasties, and especially during that Golden State LeBron, you know, the Golden State Cleveland years, we knew what was going to happen. We knew how it was going to end. It was going to be those two in the finals, and that made the earlier stuff, I think, less important. Not that I wasn't entertained by it, but I kind of like this. I kind of like the fact that throughout this thing, I didn't know if the Knicks would get there. I didn't know if San Antonio would get there. I actually thought there was going to be a beginning of a dynasty with Oklahoma City. So anyway.
No, see, and that's why you just changed my mind in call, Sheehan. I'm with you. I like it better this way because Kevin Sheehan every day said the Thunder, there would be nobody to beat the Thunder.
Yeah.
He was hammering the Thunder, and he was wrong. And I always love to see if you can fool Kevin Sheehan, the parody is real, and it's always going to bring up.
I do think if Jalen Williams doesn't get hurt, they're hoisting. We're in Game 6 tomorrow night in the Garden with Oklahoma City up 3-2.
I don't.
I do
because I think he does hit shots. He is a great player, but sometimes and a lot of times, and it showed this year, You know, he was hurt, but he plays bad basketball sometimes. And it showed in that bad shot that he took at the end of the game. That was a daggone brick. And when the last game he played, Sheehan, remember? In crunch time.
In the series before, I mean, they didn't really they didn't get tested.
I'm not a big fan of Jalen Williams.
Okay.
Neither
he
one
was
of them.
he was absolutely crucial to their title last year. Obviously, he was the second best player on the
100%.
team last year.
100%. Love you, Sheehan.
See you. All right. Let's go to Johnny in Arlington. Johnny, go ahead.
Hello, Kevin. How are you?
I'm well, Johnny.
I tend to agree with you. Like it the way it is right now. Back in the days, you know exactly who's going to make it to the final. You can actually predict who's going to win the game. And after the season is over, you don't watch any, personally, I don't watch any playoff games because I know who's going to be on top. So right now, it's a surprise, and I'll be forced to watch the other playoff games. I've watched more games now than I ever did back in the days during the playoff era. So I'm happy with the way things are. That's all.
Good call. Appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, and going into next year, here's what you can't do. You can't start figuring out next year until we get through the month of July. Or even the next week, where Giannis could be on the move. Jaylen Brown could be on the move. There could be big changes in places like Denver. We'll see what happens with Chet Holmgren in Oklahoma City. We'll see if San Antonio adds another big to the mix. We'll see who the Wizards draft at number 1. There's a lot going on. Look, the NBA, like the NFL, has done a great job, just not at the same level in terms of mass interest. But they've done a phenomenal job of turning the sport into more than just the season itself. All right, we're going to talk Wizards next with Greg Finberg from Bullets Forever. We'll find out with some of the stories recently about Darren Peterson not wanting to interview with another team other than the Wizards. Who does Greg think the Wizards will draft? That's next.
Plenty of twists and turns between now and the draft. Our Shams Charania is here again with a developing story regarding Darren Peterson of Kansas. Shams, what's the latest?
George, Darren Peterson, potential top pick, visited with the Washington Wizards last week. But that's not the interesting part. The major wrinkle here, about a week from the NBA draft, is multiple sources tell ESPN that Darren Peterson has made the decision to only work out and visit with the Washington Wizards. He is not granting anyone else any access to him, any other workout or visit with him. He's only visiting with a number 1 pick team in the Wizards. I'm told Peterson has met with and worked out multiple times in Washington, D.C. and in the Los Angeles area with the Wizards. AJ DeBonsa, the other player expected to be either the number 1 or number 2 overall pick, he went and visited with both the Wizards and the Utah Jazz. This is a case where my understanding is both Darren Peterson and AJ DeBonsa believe they will be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft.
Be great if they could just pick both of them at number 1, but they're going to have to choose, and maybe a trade is part of the possibilities a week from tonight as well. Yeah, a week from tonight, that NBA draft always starts pretty much when the finals end. A week from tonight, the Wizards will be on the clock at number 1, selecting more likely than not between BYU's AJ DeBonsa and Kansas's Darren Peterson. Joining us right now is Greg Finberg. Greg is the staff editor at Bullets Forever, a great site, one of my favorite sites over the years because I am hardcore Bullets Wizards, and they've done a great job. He's got a Wizards podcast as well. You can follow Greg on X at Greg Finberg. Real quickly, before we start getting into a lot of news related to the Wizards here, including that from yesterday, Alex Sarr fractured his foot. First of all, how did it happen? And then give us what the expected timeline, Greg, is on his return.
Yeah, so obviously unfortunate news with Alex Sarr. He fractured his right foot in a contact injury during a contact workout last week. The Wizards announced that he had surgery yesterday on Monday, and that he should be back by the start of the 2026-27 season. There wasn't a mention of whether he'd be back by training camp or if he would just be back by the start of the season in October. Obviously not ideal, especially in a big man, 7 foot, a lot of weight on there, not necessarily the greatest thing to be dealing with foot injuries. But it seems like they avoided the worst. Anytime you hear someone got injured in the off season, you don't want it to be any sort of tear to the ACL or Achilles. Obviously, this isn't that. It could be a Lisfranc fracture that has him out for months and months and months. But this one seems like it was a fracture, and that he should be back by the start of the season. So all things considered, not ideal, but the fact that he'll be in the starting lineup by October, that's pretty good news, I think.
Greg, of all the young players they've acquired via the draft and even trades, all of the true young players, 23 and younger, we know the list since the effort to lose to be in the position they're in now began. Do you think among that list of players, Keyshawn George, Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr, Bub Carrington, Trey Johnson, Will Riley, who am I forgetting? Among that list, do you think that there is a future MVP contender among that group?
If there was going to be one among that group, again, I think Keyshawn George would be my pick, but I don't necessarily think that he has the scoring or offensive production to covet that. I mean, you're seeing MVPs nowadays that are averaging 30 plus a game. And I think Keyshawn's an incredible defender. I think Keyshawn can easily average 20 a game, but I'm not sure he's going to be that offensive engine or that go-to scorer that's going to warrant that. I don't know if his offensive numbers and production can get to that level of an SGA or of a Luka up there in points. So again, I don't know if they have that. I mentioned on the podcast a couple of days ago, I don't know if they have the offensive engine, the number one option at the moment. If they take a DeBonsa or Peterson, again, those are guys that most evaluators would say have all NBA or MVP upside. And again, that's the great part about having the number one pick is you have a lot of great young pieces, but you maybe don't have that, number one option, that guy with MVP upside, and you control the draft. You can go ahead and add whoever you want in a week from today to be that option for you guys.
Yeah, I'm excited about Keyshawn George as well. I'm also excited about Will Riley and Trey Johnson, but I would agree with you. I don't necessarily see an MVP contender, but I do see an all-star or two, a future all-star or two in the group. Do you? And if so, in addition to George, who else would be in that category?
I would say Alex Sarr. I mean, just the two-way production from him. He's one of the best rim protectors in the league before he got hurt last season. Averaged 2 blocks, so he can protect the rim and defend on that side of the ball. And offensively, a guy that shot 39% from the field as a rookie raised that to 48% from the field last year. Shot 33% from three, which is a respectable number for a big in his second year. And he was able to score from all three levels. Added a mid-range game towards the end of the season. Was able to score inside. Has to get a little bit better there. But he has guard skills sometimes with the ball. He can take it from one end, dribble it up to the other end, and go coast to coast. He's a real talent. He's arguably the most talented young prospect they have right now, not considering the number one pick they have. So if they have two all-stars, I think my best bet would be Keyshawn and Alex Sarr.
Yeah, I'm with you too. And I think the stroke has looked good even going back to his rookie year, regardless of what the percentages are from behind the arc. All right. I saw and I just read during the break that there was this report and you retweeted it and you wrote interesting here. Jake Fisher, who does Jake write for? It's some sort of NBA site, suggested that Trae Young will likely end up with a long-term agreement here, but sources tell him that several teams, including Miami, are considering trade avenues to add Trae Young prior to the draft. What do you think the chances of them trading Trae Young before the draft or even after the draft are?
I'd say pretty low. This is a guy that was acquired by Washington when seemingly no one else was willing to acquire him. He had that lingering $49 million player option for the 26-27 season, had been injured most of the season, and it just seemed like obviously Atlanta didn't want to pay it, and no team really did, but Washington came in there, was able to trade an expiring salary in McCollum and Corey Kispert to make it work. And it seems like up until yesterday, it was pretty much a given that Young would extend in Washington. And it's I think, worth noting that Jake Fisher mentioned that it's still the more likely possibility that Young remains in Washington, signs a long-term extension, and that this really only happens if the Heat whiff on Giannis Antetokounmpo, because Fisher said that Young alongside Kawhi Leonard and John Morant are some of these like big fish backup options for Miami if they can't land Giannis. And if I've learned anything over the last couple off seasons, it's that when the Miami Heat are in trade talks for a star, they're never going to really get that star. It seems like they're in on everyone, but never get anyone. If you recall with Bradley Beal, Miami was supposed to be the front runner. And then Phoenix came in with a package that really didn't blow anybody away, but was better than what Miami was offering. And they ended up getting Beal. Obviously, you had Miami, not get Giannis last offseason or at the deadline this past season. So there are a couple of things that still stand in the way. Like if Miami gets Giannis, this isn't really too much of a story. But what's interesting about a possible Trae Young extension is Fisher noted that this could be used by Young's camp as potential leverage almost in negotiations with Washington, because he was saying that Young could covet a salary close to what he made in Atlanta, which is 5 years, $215 million. I mean, that started at 37, but was ascending value and is now at 49 million this year. So again, way more than people thought Young could get. I mean, the expectation is 3 years, 120 million, and this is almost double that. So that's very interesting that these, rumors or reported new interest could be huge in extension talks between Young and Washington, potentially giving Trae Young some leverage that people didn't think he would have. But again, I think Trae Young only has that leverage if the alternative is he just leaves for free in free agency and signs with a team like Miami, which again, if it's at that figure, doesn't make much sense because Miami can't afford it. They're going to be $33 million over the tax $40 million under the tax, $40 million under the first apron, and $50 million under the second apron. If you added Young, who's going to be making around $40 to $50 million in that range, they can't really afford it. And if you factor in about $6 million for the number 13 pick they have in this year's draft, those numbers go to $27 million under the tax, $34 million under the first apron, and $46 million under the second apron. So it's not like they have this flexibility to add Young. And I'm using Miami because they're the only team that was mentioned. But I don't really buy that he has this new leverage in trade talks, and I don't really buy that this means much. I think this is just another one of those reports that gets thrown out there. And if they get Giannis again, this all means nothing. It's just likely that Trae Young remains in Washington.
What do you think they do with Anthony Davis?
I think he stays. I've maintained that throughout. I've maintained that. Yeah. I think he's about $58 million this year, and then $63 million player option the following year. And I mean, at 33 years old, I don't think he's going to be able to covet this type of money on the open market. So it's probably the last time he can try to get an extension. I think that's really what he wants out of this, is to get some sort of long-term extension. So I haven't had much of a problem with what he's been saying. He wants to get paid. I'm not sure Washington really is in the camp of wanting to extend him. So if that's not going to be the case, then maybe he's looking for somewhere else. But I think it just plays itself out. I think he plays out at least the first half of the year in Washington. You see how it goes. And if the team isn't going or playing great, Davis is healthy and they're suitors, then maybe you look to move him. If everything's going right, then maybe you don't. But Washington's not necessarily in a space where they have to do anything regarding the Davis situation.
All right. Let's talk about a week from tonight. Before we get to what you would like them to do, what do you think's going on right now? I mean, more people than not are reporting Debonsa, but then you've got this Peterson, situation where, by the way, I think it's terrible advice that he's working out for one team, given all of the mystery around his season at Kansas. I think he should be accepting every single meeting with an opportunity to explain what happened face to face with all of these teams, especially at the top of the draft. But what do you make of that report? Do you think that the Wizards are, still between these two players, or have they made a decision?
I think for Washington, it's this two-horse race, and I think it's probably been that the entire time. But ESPN reported yesterday that it is down to either Debonsa or Peterson with the number one pick. There's a lot of smoke screens, during this whole process, and you got to be smart with what you believe and what you don't believe. From Peterson's perspective, I'm sure he knows that if he doesn't go one, he's not falling past two, that Utah is going to take him. And so there's not much, I guess, incentive or motivation for him to work out with Utah or meet with Utah, because they're going to draft him anyway. Even if he blows them away with the workout, it's not like they're going to trade up a spot to go get the guy that's probably going to fall to them at two. And if he has a bad workout, then maybe the workout with Boozer in Utah was good and they decide to pivot. So I understand it from his perspective in that, why would I do that? It's like when a player who's going to get drafted in the first round doesn't throw at the NFL Combine. It's like, well, I don't think that's necessarily because he's scared or thinks he would fail. But
a lot of those players don't have the backstory that he has. There's a lot of mystery around him. That's why you would do it. I mean, how many teams has Debonsa had formal visits with?
ESPN reported that Friday he met with the Wizards, and then Saturday he met with Utah, and he said he's only working out for those two teams. So
yeah. All right. So what do you think is going to happen? Where do you have a lean for them or not?
I mean, I've maintained throughout the whole draft process that I think it's just going to be Debonsa. Like, I think it's going to be all this smoke and all these reports, but at the end of the day, Debonsa will go 1, Peterson will go 2, Boozer 3, and Wilson 4, and then the draft really starts at 5. I'm not really in line to buy too much into a lot of these reports, and I will say, with all the information that ESPN's Jeremy Wu and Shams Charania have, with all the shift in thinking now that Peterson canceled that Utah workout, ESPN still has AJ Debonsa as number 1 pick in their mock draft. Almost every other mock draft you'll find still has AJ Debonsa, and that's based on whatever information they clearly have that they believe he's still going to be the first pick. Again, I think that's just going to be the case. I think it's going to be a bunch of reports and rumors and smoke screens just for us to get to the draft and just see Washington take Devonta, who I think they should take, and I do think is the best prospect.
All right. Well, that was what I was going to ask you next. We're talking to Greg Finberg from Bullets Forever. So you want Devonta. Tell me why.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of reasons. And the number one is just like you can't teach the size, the speed, the athleticism to which he possesses. It's a lot of unteachable traits there. 6'10" in shoes, above a 7-foot wingspan, can handle like a guard, can run and blow past defenders in transition, in the open court, even in the half court. It's a lot of stuff that you can't necessarily teach that he possesses. He's also just the best pure scorer in this class. And for a team like Washington that needs this offensive scoring engine, that needs this number one option with MVP upside, he kind of fits everything they need as this big wing that can go get you a bucket when everyone knows who's about to get the ball. He averaged 25.5 points per game at BYU as a freshman, which led all of Division I, and he did it on above 50% shooting from the field. And the best part about his game is he can get to the rim seemingly whenever he wants. He shot 72.3% at the rim at BYU, which was in the 91st percentile among fellow prospects. He can also get into the mid-range, which is something that's kind of returning in the league. Averaged 8 mid-range jump shots per 100 possessions, which is the 94th percentile. Shot 46% from the mid-range, which is in the 91st percentile among fellow prospects. And that's kind of where the game is shifting, right? It's not necessarily all about the three ball anymore. You're seeing Shea, you're seeing Brunson operate in the mid-range, operate around the bucket. That's kind of what works now. And that's what A.J. Devonta does really well. And a lot of the negative parts of his game, or at least the question marks, are about his defense, which I don't necessarily see as the biggest issue, considering he's 6'10" in shoes, 7-foot wingspan, incredibly athletic, great hops, a 42-inch vert at the combine. It seems like he has a lot of the traits that are translatable on that end, and with more film study, with maybe less pressure on him to do everything offensively and more incentive for him to lock in on the defensive end, I think he projects as a solid defender, at least in the league. And then the other question mark is his outside jumper, 33.1% from three at BYU. Obviously not a great mark, not the worst mark either, but he also shot 44%, I think, on off the dribble threes. And showed a willingness to take that shot. And there are other things that showcase, other indicators that showcase he has good touch, like the 46% clip from the mid-range. He was able to use the floater and go off glass. So there are indicators that he can develop that jumper. Like John Wall came into the league shooting 32% from three. He turned out pretty well. Anthony Edwards shot 29% from three at Georgia. 5 years later, he made 323s, a 39% clip for Minnesota, led the league in three-point shooting. Like it's not like you can't develop a three-point jumper. And to me, AJ has all of the traits that you really can't teach in what you want for a number one option with MVP upside, which is why I think Washington should take him at number one.
Greg, thanks. Great job. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Greg Finberg from Bullets Forever at Greg Finberg, Finberg on X. Yeah, I really like Peterson's game. I just have a lot of question marks about Peterson, and I think a lot of teams do. I really like A.J. Devonta's game. There's one thing, and I think I've talked about this previously. He really is just a flat-out scorer as much as he is a shooter. He's very patient. He has the ability to get to a spot. He has the ability with his size to shoot over people. His release isn't at the highest point. It's more sort of almost shoulder or a little bit above the shoulders. But still, he's 6'10" with the wingspan, and with the extension, he should be fine. Defense, it's so hard to predict. Defense in college, a lot of these teams play so much zone anyway. It's really hard to project, especially when they are so young and physically underwhelming for the most part. I'd find it hard to believe that Devonta isn't going to score at a pretty healthy clip at the NBA level. I love the fact that he loves basketball as much as anything else, and is a total gym rat by all accounts. And played literally at times 40 minutes per game. I think he had 6 games over his last 18 or 17 games where he played all 40 minutes. He had 35 in the game in the tournament. They lost to Texas in the first round of the tournament, but he had 35 in that game, shot it well. Darren Peterson, though, there is something when you watch him in the games in which he played well at Kansas, where there was an effortless way in which he created space and scored. And it's not like massively explosive. It is more deliberate. It's more methodical. And it's really fun to watch. The problem, of course, is that he wasn't always playing this year. If there's bad advice, if there's immaturity, or if he was legitimately hurt or legitimately sick, things change, as we said with Wemby. And, you know, if you didn't see Darren Peterson play, put on a couple of the games. Put on the game that they played against BYU, against Dabonsa in his first half in that game. Put on the tournament loss to St. John's early in the game and then late in the game. There is a way in which he plays that's like, wow, he is smooth. He looks like he's not even trying, and yet there's all this space that's created with his handle, with his movement, and he can score at a high clip too. Dabonsa, I don't know if either one of them is going to end up being an MVP 7 years down the road, but I do think that that's the choice. Acuff Jr. is still the guy that I think more than anybody else, I would be shocked if he's not averaging 26, 27, 28 a game within 3 or 4 years in the NBA. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. right now is Jesse Doherty. Jesse covered the Nats for the Post for a few years, and now he's with Notus, Notus. You can follow Jesse on X at Dougherty_Jesse. Dougherty is DOUGHERTY. Jesse, I mean, where are we right now in terms of, is it time to take the Nats serious or not?
Yeah. Well, Kevin, I appreciate it, man. And it's like a spelling bee, spelling my outlet, spelling my last name. So I appreciate the efforts, man.
Yeah, but at least I got the pronunciation correct, because I think the first time you were on, I did not get it correctly. Yes.
All good. All good. It's not phonetic, so I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like the central question now of June and July, and I am fascinated by it. I think that, I wrote for Notice on Monday that this sounds cliche, or it sounds maybe obvious, but every win or every series win, we get farther away from the start of the season and closer to them not backsliding at, people maybe predicted would have happened 2 weeks ago or a month ago or 6 weeks ago. And so it gets more real by the day. Now, typically teams with big payrolls have players who are more proven across 6 months. So you can sort of set your watch maybe to their performance a little better than young guys who may be more volatile. So that's obviously the question mark. But when you get to mid-June and you're scoring more than any team in baseball, like, you have to at least look up and ask the questions you are, because it does feel like there's a chance this is real. And then the pitching concerns are what they are. And I'm sure we'll talk about that too.
Yeah. Is there a point in a 162 game season where it's no longer, sample size conversation? It's like, okay, This is who they are. Now, whether or not, it'll manifest itself into enough to qualify for the postseason, and whether or not they'll stay healthy, obviously those are things you can't predict. But is there a point, for baseball people to say, yeah, no, this is actually who they are in 2026?
Well, the easiest way to answer that question, it might sound like a cop-out, is that the deadline sort of does that for us. And especially for an org now, as the Nats are, that is super analytic-minded and super data-minded, like, the executives need to tell us in late June, early July, and mid-July what they think of their team. And they actually don't need to tell us that any other time of the year, right? Because when you're in a press conference and you say, you like your roster? Yeah, we love our roster. Or do you like your pitching staff? Oh, we feel good about our pitching staff. But with your actions, which are, do I add to this team? Do I subtract from this team? Do I plan for future years? Do I hit the gas on this season? They tell us around the deadline what they think of themselves. And that is based on not just vibes, especially now. It's based on internal projections, data, what the luck metrics say, whether this is sustainable. So I think the answer is around the deadline. It's 4 months in. It's more than half. It comes at a time when you're either putting up or shutting up. And I think, these teams that are really, really smart and these teams that are really, really process driven have to give us their public reflections on their roster at that point. So that's why I am completely locked into this storyline. It's a little bit removed from the day-to-day of the team, but I think there's nothing more interesting going on with this team right now than how this new front office reacts to this early success, because it's going to be very telling of what they think, not just in the next 2 months, but I think the next 2 years or so.
All right, so let's not project to the end of next month or the first part of August. What if the deadline were tomorrow? How do you think they'd handle it?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're tracking toward 80 wins, which is what they are, they're a little bit over that right now, but when you're about 500, I think what you do is you probably, the most savvy teams can kind of soft buy and soft sell at the same time. So maybe you go, you make some of your weaknesses a little bit better. So you take some mid to low level prospects and get coin flip relievers. You don't go all in for the best closer on the market. And then maybe you take a surprise bat, someone like Curtis Mead, who maybe has a small market, and then you backfill some of those prospect spots by selling high on a guy who maybe your projections say is batting above his station, but he's had a really good year, and there's a contender that needs a righty bat really bad, so the market's good enough to go, offload him, right? I think that's the mindset of a team that's in this specific period, which 80 wins. And when I talked to Paul Taboni on June 1st, I made this joke in my column the other day. It's like he presented the case for a 60-win team and a 100-win team. And I said to him, you didn't say 80 because that's what you are right now. And it's really complicated to be 80.
Right.
And So I think sort of the soft on either side, right? You're not going all in. Now, it would be really reasonable for any fan who's invested in this team being good and is sick of this losing to say they have the best, offense in baseball through 2.5 months. Why aren't you going all out for the best closer on the market? I think that's fair. And that's the tension of sort of the long game and the short game that I think is like really present in all these rebuild scenarios, is when you start winning earlier than expected, you have to really confront, whatever your sort of perfectly laid plan was with what the actual results of the moment are telling you. If the Nationals were on pace for 90 to 100 wins, it would be a different story. 80 now, I think, is they're still in that sort of middle ground.
Well, they're on pace for more
than
than 80 with a 521 win percentage, right? It's more like 83.
Right, 91, right. So
yeah, and it would certainly be in contention for one of the wild card spots, into mid-September at the very least.
Yeah, and that's when you sort of like, you get into sort of meta discussions about sports, which I find fascinating. Is like, what is the point of all this?
Right.
And is it
exactly
to go all in when you can make the wild card and take your lottery ticket and say we're going to go against the Dodgers in the playoffs and we're going to take our shot, or is it to say maybe this isn't the year to sneak in and we're going to really make every move we can to make sure in 2028 we're much more substantial. Now you might just say, well you're not going to have the best offense in baseball on June 16th in 2028. So what are we doing? I think that's a fair criticism that does maybe fly in the face of how like these prudent, data-minded front offices might operate in 2026.
Well, I also wonder whether or not the business of the Washington Nationals is a consideration. Look, they had the worst luck ever, a pandemic following their first World Series in nearly 100 years. And all of the economic benefit that would have come with that had they played a normal season, not to mention the owners were in real estate primarily. That's their primary business, commercial real estate, and people weren't going to work. So everything sort of came together at the worst possible moment for the franchise, for ownership, et cetera. But, there's, you look at attendance, it's not great despite them actually being an exciting team, as you mentioned, and I've mentioned it many times, the highest scoring team in baseball right now. Like, I'm wondering if the business of the franchise would have them leaning more aggressively at the trade deadline. If we're in this spot right now, 3 games over 500, then maybe they would have if they were, had been a playoff team 2 years ago. Or 3 years ago.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think I don't have any reporting on this, so I want to preface it by saying this is me just sort of riffing off your riff, which I think is, again, fascinating. Is like I mentioned earlier that we're going to get a good idea of how the front office views the team at the deadline, but what it might tell us about how ownership views their own investment in this, franchise. And that's a really good question, because you're right. Like if you truly are planning to run a top 15 payroll in 2 years, you might say, let's not trade that prospect who could be a part of that and be a great fourth outfielder or a great second baseman or a great reliever. Let's hold on to that because we know we're going to really push a lot of chips in. Or if this is just kind of around what you're going to be, which is like a lower end payroll, more of a sort of Brewers, I don't want to say Brewers and Rays because that's really small market, but more of the approach of like trying to win, with your player development, trying to win with, on the margins, trying to win with creative roster building, not necessarily going after star players, then you could argue, which I think maybe is what you're getting at, that any time you're in the wild card hunt, you should at least push some chips in, right? Because you're close enough. And maybe you're not viewing yourself as a team that's going to be in that upper payroll echelon and putting together star-studded rosters anymore. So if this is what you are, then any year where that roster is overperforming is a chance to maybe add, not just a coin flip reliever, but someone who's a bit more substantial and play in that market. So that's an interesting, debate. I mean, the Brewers and the Rays over the years have added at the deadline. They also sometimes tend to subtract when they're playing really well, which can be disorienting. And I think that's something that, when I talked to Paul Taboni, he mentioned the Freddie Peralta trade to the Mets from the Brewers being like, that's not popular, but those are the kind of decisions that in the arc of building a sustainable winner, you might sometimes have to make. So, he's looking at all that. And I think we're going to find out really soon, how a lot of people in that building feel about this franchise, because to your point, every trade deadline is a bellwether, I think, for, what future years might hold.
Well, and we've got the added piece to this, which is their desire to sell the team. And would being in the postseason increase valuation? I don't know if it would or not. I know that the labor confrontation that is threatening, in 2027 is probably a bigger issue that has to be cleared up in terms of how the Nats would be valued, and would they get the valuation that they've wanted all along for the team? I don't know. There's probably a lot of work here because it is an organization that didn't expect this, A. B, has an ownership group that's been, certainly interested in selling the team, but hasn't gotten their number, and has two incredibly young analytics-based guys running the organization right now that kind of came in and said, yeah, this is going to be a process. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens. I think your first point is the best one, and that is we're really going to know what this is from a number of angles at the trade deadline. Now, let me ask you this, and we're talking to Jesse Doherty, who's covered the team for a while. Other than the record, what's been the biggest surprise to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I think how some players who were holdovers from the last regime, who you maybe would have thought were dead in the water in terms of development and production, like Ruiz. I mean, that's probably the main one. And I think Garcia has had some power flashes that have been fun, and statistically he's not performing like K-Bear, so let's go there. Yeah, Ruiz is a perfect one. Like players you thought, man, like cannot catch, cannot frame, cannot throw out runners, is not hitting, had come here as part of a big time trade as the catcher of the future, was signed on an 8-year contract as the catcher of the future. Development in the major leagues is a big hallmark of this group. Like they sort of have standardized processes across, this is their line, and it sounds corny, but from the DR to Washington, they believe that they can still develop talent even at that stage, rather than saying a guy makes it, he's not performing, and, oh, well, he just wasn't good enough, or it was a bad draft choice, or it was a bad scouting in a trade. So I think my biggest surprise has been some of these players who were holdovers and maybe seemed like they were never going to be part of a winning team have turned into productive pieces, either for a deadline or for the next wave, or to back up somebody else who comes up. You need 26 players, and the fact that some players who maybe never felt like they were going to be part of that picture now are playing their way back into it is one of the bigger surprises to me.
Do we have two guaranteed all-stars at this point in Abrams and Wood?
It's a loaded time to ask that question because fan voting came out yesterday, and James Wood is just on the outside. Yeah, well, anyway, Abrams is first in shortstops, and Wood is seventh in outfielders, which is insane, and 6 outfielders go on the fan vote. So, yes, I think so, because I think even if, this every year, guys drop out, there's injury replacements, even if for some reason the fan vote didn't end up going James Wood's way, he's been the second best hitter in the National League behind Shohei Ohtani. He would be a replacement. Baseball would find a way to get him there. I think that you can pretty much pencil in the fact that Abrams is leading all shortstops, and then Wood is right on the fringe and playing the way he is. I believe that there is two all-stars there, and man, they play really, really well. I mean, the lineup's deeper than I expected, but it's definitely relying on them, and it's working right now. I mean, they're hitting that well to carry a whole group.
Dylan Cruz just hit his 4th homer since being called up, but he's also hitting 195 since being called up. Yeah. So just give me your overall evaluation of him since they called him up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm newly back in this world. He's someone who I was on the beat when they drafted him. I mean, I know how much excitement there was, and one of the more decorated and better college hitters coming out in recent memory. I think since coming back up, his pitch selection has improved a lot, and I think when he's going poorly, it's because he's just kind of flailing and swinging it a lot outside the zone. I think also, he's showing, and this is not necessarily what you want, at least as the sort of finished product of the 2nd overall pick, but he's making a lot happen on the base pass. He's playing a really good center field. The fact that he can play all 3 outfield positions, you don't want to say is this guy just going to be a 4th outfielder for you? But I will just point out they have really good outfield depth right now, and if he is a player who never reaches his offensive potential, which could very well happen, but he also is a really productive base runner. He's fast. He plays defense. That still is a winning. You can still have that be part of your winning formula. So the offense certainly is tracking well. He's hitting the ball hard. I think, again, it really comes down to pitch selection. Doesn't seem like timing's a huge issue for him when he's actually swinging at the right pitches, which, of course, easier said than done. But we've seen in recent weeks a lot of his underlying stats tick up, and that would sort of foretell him turning it around. I mean, that average is an eyesore, but it's also somewhat of a victim of small sample, right? Where he went down to AAA. His numbers are not that. When you don't have a lot of at bats in the season, that's a pretty impressionable number. But again, and he's one slump away from it getting even worse. So it doesn't necessarily mean it has to just improve just because he's up here now. But it does seem like he's in a better place at the plate, at least so far.
We're talking Nats with Jesse Doherty. The Nats are 3 games over 500 for the first time this year. If the season ended today, they'd actually be tied for the 3rd wild card spot in the National League. They've won 5 of their last 6 series. The one they lost was to the Marlins, where they got swept at home, and they took the first of 3 against the Royals last night at Nats Park. Just give me any reason to be, even slightly optimistic about pitching at this point.
Yeah, I mean, before that Giants implosion, the bullpen actually has improved. I think that the manager is really adept at working matchups. He's the ERA and the homers allowed might not necessarily tell you this, but I think he's actually in some cases done a lot with a little. And you definitely need that on a staff that's sometimes short on lefties in the pen, or is trying not to overtax guys and throw them 3 straight days and really has stayed away from that. Like, those are sort of oxymoronic to winning in a lot of cases, right? Like, there was times, if you think about the 2019 run, not to go all the way back there, like, that staff was shortened to 6 pitchers, and guys were pitching all the time. And so this group now is trying to sort of not only take a bullpen and a staff that had relatively no money pumped into it, but also do it while protecting arms, protecting, heading off injury risk, but then also trying to be really matchup based in their approach and use openers for 2 starters. And they're doing a lot. So the optimism is that they're willing to throw a lot against the wall and kind of try to make it work no matter what, rather than just like running out 5 guys for 4 innings, letting them get pummeled. Like, there seems like a real conscious effort to win every night. And like, that's not always necessarily the case for teams that are quote unquote rebuilding or not built to win in a given year. They might just say, for development purposes, we're going to pitch young guys in random spots and let them sort of work through an inning in real time, or we're going to ride our 5th starter just because we need innings to be eaten. I think that was the experience of Patrick Corbin in the last few years of his contract. It was like, you felt crazy watching him go out there, but it really was in service of helping the bullpen not burn out, because he could eat 6-7 innings and get his brains beat in. And that was a service. Like, this staff is not doing that. They're actually trying to press every button possible given the constraints in the group they have. And I think that's the biggest reason for optimism, like sort of personnel wise, it doesn't feel great, but like Michaelis and Littell, ticking up in the last month or so, like, that certainly, portends well for this staff's ability to sort of influence results at the major league level again, even with veteran arms.
All right, let me switch subjects completely with you just for a last minute or two, because I was going to get to this next hour anyway, but with you on, Jesse covers college sports as well. Brendan Sorsby, the quarterback at Texas Tech, who was, ruled ineligible, and then the courts came in and said, nope, he's eligible. Well, yesterday, the reports are he's going to apply for the NFL supplemental draft. So he's going to head to the NFL, not play at Texas Tech. Before we get to just your reaction on this whole story, I'm curious as to whether or not how much in NIL money he's already been given and whether or not he'll have to give it back.
So I don't know the exact number. I do know he got a big contract, but I also, as of last night, the Cody Campbell, who's, the chair of Texas Tech's Board of Regents, but also, their billionaire benefactor of their football team, I mean, effectively functions as close as we have to a public team owner in college sports.
Right. And they spend big. That team was a very expensive team last year.
Yeah, it was like a sort of best team money can buy deal. And he has said Brendan Sorsby will not have to get any of the money back. He's already made. So we do know that.
Really?
Yeah.
And it's in the millions that he's been paid already, right? I mean, I don't know how the payments are made, but I'm going to assume that he's made at least $1 million or $2 million on a $4 or $5 million deal, right?
Well, I don't know for sure, but there are like they do sometimes sort of like have a signing bonus, but then they pay you during the season, and like they do that to sort of guard against like should a guy, I mean, get caught gambling, right? I mean, certainly there's probably going to be more creative accounting moving forward because everyone's going to be nervous now that they have the next Brendan Sorsby on their roster. But I'm not necessarily, it's not necessarily like they sign a deal and then it's doled out like an every 2-week like salary like you would get at a job, you know, like mine necessarily. So I'm not sure if you can just take the days since he signed it and sort of take the fraction of his salary was, because there is some sort of you know, structure there that's different.
So I've got 30 seconds here, but I want your thoughts.
Sure.
Ultimately, him not playing in college football after those that don't know, he was ruled ineligible by the NCAA after it discovered he placed more than 9,000 bets totaling at least $90,000 while he was enrolled at Indiana and Cincinnati, especially at Indiana where he wasn't playing, but he was betting on Indiana football. Do you think this is a good result, him just, you know, bailing out and going to the NFL for college football overall? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it was the most logical one because he would have been the most scrutinized player in history next year. I mean, there were already teams saying behind the scenes that they were no longer going to schedule Texas Tech across sports, not just in football, because of this as a sort of soft protest. So that's one element. I'll leave it here quickly. I mean, I think, you know, people often say college sports are professionalized, and what I always say is they're actually a lot more dysfunctional and disorganized than pro sports, and that's largely because pro sports have collectively bargained agreements with their unions.
Right.
Not necessarily a stump for employment and unionization in college sports. It's very tricky, but I do think this should stoke conversations about whether a collective bargaining structure, employee structure is the way to go in the absence of a congressional bill. That's a lot of stuff at once. I know we got to go, but maybe we'll schedule a time soon.
No, you're right. I think you're right, because ultimately we're just going to have this thing settled by, you know, local and district courts, and players are going to get stays of execution for the lack of a better description and be able to play before they head to the NFL anyway. Thanks for doing this so much. Appreciate it, Jesse. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. All right, joining me right now is Tim Bontemps. He is the senior NBA writer at ESPN. You can follow him on X at Tim Bontemps. Tim was, of course, here in D.C. with the Washington Post as its national NBA writer back in the mid-2010s. I love having Tim on the show to talk NBA, and what better day to do it than after one of the more memorable, I think, 5-game series in the history of the NBA Finals. I'll start with this. I did read what you wrote yesterday. I loved it, and I do want to get into some of the New York stuff. But if someone who didn't watch the NBA Finals but knew the Knicks 1-5 came up to you and asked you to tell them about how it happened, how would you describe it?
I would describe it by saying that the smartest and toughest player in the NBA willed his team to a title, which is, I think, the simplest way to describe it. I mean, Jalen Brunson is not the biggest guy. He's not the fastest guy. He's not the strongest guy, but he is the, I would say, probably physically and mentally toughest guy in the league. And he is probably just about the smartest. And his ability to find cracks in the defense and to manipulate defenders in a way where he can get to his spots and get his shots off, and his steadfast resolve to keep coming regardless of how his personal game is going or how the team's game is going, is really the thing that powers the Knicks along. And it's the thing that has allowed them to have 5 different comebacks of at least 20 points in the last 2 years in the playoffs. And it's the thing that obviously allowed them to make that incredible comeback in Game 4 last week. And it's the same thing that allowed him to just really stay Saturday night in San Antonio, that he was just not going to lose the game. And, that 45-point performance in Game 5 is going to go down as one of the greatest performances in the history of the sport. I mean, there's 4 guys in the history of the league who've had at least 45 points in a closeout game of the NBA Finals to win a title. They're Michael Jordan, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Bob Pettit, and Jalen Brunson. 4 Hall of Fame players. And, Jalen Brunson was maybe already going to the Hall of Fame if he didn't have this playoff run. But after the last 2 months, there is zero doubt that he will be a Hall of Fame player. And that run the Knicks just went on is one of the most dominant runs we've ever seen a team have in the playoffs. And it's obviously for the bigger picture reasons of the Knicks snapping their 53-year championship drought. It's going to be one of the most celebrated titles in the history of the league.
You wrote, success in the NBA more than any other professional team sport is determined by having the best player, and the Knicks have hardly been in that position. I've pointed out over the years that you pretty much have to go back to the 04 Pistons. You could make a case that the 2014 Spurs didn't have a top 5 superstar on their team, but they did have Kawhi, who was he was an up-and-comer at that point. Duncan was kind of on his way down a little bit, but they won that title. But if you take them out of the equation and say, well, Duncan was still borderline top 5, or Kawhi was ascending to being a top 5 player, basically every champion has had a debatable top 5 player in the league on their roster since the 04 Pistons. Do you view the Knicks as a team that just won a title without an obvious top 5 player, or do you consider Brunson to be a top 5 player?
No, I mean, I think he's been a second-team All-NBA player each of the last few seasons, right? I mean, he's been second-team 3 years in a row. Like, he's somewhere in the back half of the top 10 probably, and he's a great player. But Isaiah Thomas is basically the only guy who's ever led a team to a title at his kind of size,
right.
6'1" or 6'2". And, Jalen Brunson, might not be, pound for pound the same talent level as Luka Doncic or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Nikola Jokic or Victor Wembanyama. But at the end of the day, if you need to win a game and you have to put the ball in the hands of one guy, if you just give the ball to Jalen Brunson and said, hey, go win us a game, he has spent the last 15 years winning at every level and winning a lot at every level. And He's repeatedly proven he can find a way to lift his team to places that people didn't expect them to go. And he did it again with his Knicks team, and as a result had one of the most remarkable playoff runs we've ever seen anybody have. And again, like both the way that series played out and the fact that the Knicks won it, I mean, that's going to go down as one of the great performances and one of the great victories in the history of the sport. And it's, you know, it's sort of put to rest whether he's a top 5 player or not, because it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, he's got a ring and he's in good shape because of it.
You know, there's been a lot of discussion about the run that they've been on and now have completed, and it is, by, you know, objective measures, the greatest playoff run in the history of the sport in terms of point differential, the 16-3 mark, the 3 losses by a point, and 4 points. So there are, you know, obviously quantifiable numbers that would suggest this is the greatest championship run we've ever seen. Put it in perspective of not the run, but where will the Knicks of 2026 rank in terms of the all-time great teams?
I mean, they're going to go down as one of the most dominant champions of the playoff run that we've ever seen. I mean, the only teams to win 15 out of 16 games in a playoff run in the history of the sport are the 0-1 Lakers with Shaq and Kobe, the 17 Warriors with Durant and Curry, and then the 2026 Knicks with Jalen Brunson, right? Like it's pretty incredible company to be in. And, you know, people could try to talk about, well, they played in the Eastern Conference or whatever, but they curb stomped their opponents on the way to the title. And then they swept aside this very talented 62-win Spurs team in 5 games. And, you know, yes, they were down at the start of the games, and yes, they didn't, you know, they had to come back in the final 2 minutes and win all 4 of the games, but at the end of the day, they won the games. And it's, you know, like I said, for a whole host of reasons, this is going to go down as one of the most memorable titles in the history of the league. And, you know, the way the Knicks played and the dominance they showed throughout this run is certainly one of the main reasons why.
How culpable were the Spurs in their own demise here over 5 games?
Certainly plenty. I mean, when you look at how every game started, you know, with them up 10 or 12 or whatever, in the first 5 minutes of the game, if you look at how the games themselves played out down the stretch, where I think San Antonio had a lead in the final 2 minutes of every game. Certainly they blew a 29-point lead in game 4. That requires a lot of good to come from the team coming back and a lot of bad to come from the team that's ahead. You know, the Victor Wembanyama missed free throws in game 5, the Victor Wembanyama missed free throws in game 4, the turnover late in game 2, and the foul. I mean, those are all things that obviously weren't great looks for him or for the Spurs. But, you know, there's also a reason why the young team never wins in the NBA, and the Spurs had an unbelievable season, and they very easily could have won this series. Like, all those games were toss-up games. But I think you saw an experienced team with a guy who has won a lot of big games and has been in a lot of big games, just kind of knew how to get themselves to the finish line against a team that had just not been in those spots before. And, you know, I think, you know, if you watch Victor's post-game presser after game 5, and he talked about the lessons he's learned from just going through this run, it's like there's a reason why the young team always loses. You have to typically learn in the NBA how to take the final step. And this experience will be part of how San Antonio comes back and wins the title. It could be as soon as next year, it could be the year after, it could be the year after that, but they're going to win one, and, you know, health permitting, they're probably going to win a lot. And this whole run, including the finals, will be the thing that helps propel them to that height when they get there.
The Knicks winning the title, Jalen Brunson's performance, especially in Game 7, all part of what everybody's talking about. But you mentioned Victor Wembanyama. A lot of people are talking about him after these 5 games. And you said about what he said in the post game that this was a learning experience for him as well. What do you think he learned?
I mean, they're going to learn the value of possessions. They're going to learn, the importance of properly closing out games. They're going to learn, it's one thing even for as great as the Spurs Thunder series was, the conference finals are not the finals. And there's a much different level of scrutiny and pressure and attention. And those are all things that he's going to learn as well. It's just the NBA playoffs typically are more like a ladder, right? And you tend to take a step up and then a couple steps and then a couple steps, and you have to sort of keep getting your footing to ascend to the top. And the Spurs jumped almost every possible step, but they got to the finals against a veteran, composed, experienced team, and they taught them a bunch of new lessons. I mean, the series this has reminded me a lot was when the Mavericks beat the Heat in 2011,
right.
And that
LeBron.
was the team led by Dirk Nowitzki. Yeah, well, it was LeBron's first year in Miami, and that was a team that obviously had a ton of talent, but hadn't played together yet, really. And, they ran into a team that had a lot of experience and a lot of know-how and had a prime star who had a tremendous series, and that was enough to get it done. And obviously that Heat team came back and won a couple titles. And like I said, this Spurs team has got just an immense amount of talent led by Victor, and assuming health, they're going to be in the mix for a very long time, and he's going to get plenty of them in the end.
Well, what's interesting about going back to that first Miami Finals team is LeBron took a ton of heat. Game 3, essentially a non-factor, almost hiding, from the basketball in the corners of the floor. When he'd touch it, it was like a hot potato. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, because, as a young player, he had the 23 and 25 point run to win the Eastern Conference Finals before they got swept by the Spurs as a very young player. And focusing on just Wembanyama's play down the stretch in these finals. Now, I don't think he cowered or disappeared, but I thought he ran out of gas in some of those games and looked completely spent physically. But still, the comparison is young player. LeBron was older, obviously, at that point. But, like from a basketball standpoint, I thought it was interesting, Tim, in that I don't know what Victor Wembanyama wants to be, and I don't know what the Spurs want him to be. What do you think? Is he a 7'5", big, or is he more of a perimeter player moving forward?
I mean, I think it's going to be a combination of the two. He's part of what makes him so special is that he is somebody that can shoot it out to the three-point line and can stress the defense that way and can also go to the rim and dunk from the free throw line, right? So I think, some of this is going to be, he's got to learn some new tricks to his game, just like all the great players do. I mean, when he sort of adopts some sort of hook shot or floater or some, kind of pet play from 8 to 12 feet that he can go to, which, is like shooting on from a couple feet away for normal humans, on a smaller hoop. He's got to, that'll make him pretty much unguardable. But he's got to learn to set better screens on the perimeter. He's got to learn to have a better short roll game. He's got to, if he's going to continue to get stronger as he gets older, not that he should put on a ton of weight, but just, physically, he'll just get used to the rigors of getting pounded on and playing in the NBA and knowing what it's like to play late in the playoffs. And look, the other thing is, too, you have to get used to playing this many minutes in this many games. And the fact of the matter is he's a gigantic human being who has pretty unbelievable conditioning, but there's no a level of conditioning that can prepare you to play these incredibly intense, high-energy games in April, May, and June in the playoffs until you've gone through it. It's another reason why the young team never wins. It's just something you have to learn. And to your point, especially after that unbelievable Game 1 performance against
OKC.
Against Oklahoma City, that was like the 48 special that you mentioned that LeBron had against the Pistons. Both those teams, both those times, the young star got through the conference finals, played an experienced team in the finals, and lost pretty handily, right? And it's not it's to me, it's not a coincidence that happened. Like that game 1 against OKC was the beginning of the Victor era, just like that 48 special is really the first thing anybody thinks of when they think of LeBron, right? That was his first true incredible performance on an NBA stage. But you usually don't win right after that. And, going into the finals, I kept referring to the Magic getting swept by the Rockets in 95 with Shaq and Penny, and the LeBron getting swept in 2007 against the Spurs when he made it the first time. And, I didn't think the Knicks were going to sweep the Spurs, but the young star in that spot, those are the best analogs for Victor ever, really. And those guys both lost. So I think it's totally understandable that the Knicks found a way to get this done. I thought they matched up very well with San Antonio. They did in the regular season too. But it was an incredible season for the Spurs. And again, I keep saying it just to not jinx it, but if this team stays healthy with Dylan Harper and Savon Castle and Victor Wembanyama, they're going to be at the end of the run. They're at the end of the road in the finals a lot of times over the next 10 or 15 years. And they're going to get plenty of chances to win titles. And I'll be very surprised if they're healthy, if they don't win a bunch of them.
If the Spurs had won Saturday night, if they had held on and actually won the game, how do you think the league would have handled the flagrant that was missed on Wembanyama?
There would have been immense pressure to call it, and I think there's a decent chance they would have. And we'll never know. I was actually going to do a pool report about that play after the game. However, it was not needed when the game ended the way it did. But it would have been fascinating to see what happened because, I think I got personally a little tired of the endless discussion of the referees, that went on over the last month of the season between the Spurs Thunder series and then the Spurs Knicks series. I just thought all the conversation around officiating was a little tiresome, but and I don't think this was some like extraordinarily dirty play by him or anything. It just he landed under Jalen and it's called as a flagrant foul, like you said, all the time. It's a pretty obvious play and wasn't seen, wasn't called. And I think it would have really caused a ton of drama over the last couple of days because I'm not sure they've ever upgraded a play like that to a flagrant after the fact, but the whole world saw it. Star player got his ankle turned and, like when I covered Draymond Green 10 years ago and he got suspended for Game 5 against the Cavaliers and contributed to Cleveland coming back and winning that title, that suspension was as much about Draymond body slamming Michael Beasley with 1 second to go in Game 3 or 4 of their first round sweep of the Rockets as it was him hitting LeBron on that play late in the game, right? And Victor Wembanyama should not have told Naz Reid in the face with his elbow in the second round.
Right.
If he didn't do that, it wouldn't have been an issue, right? So I really wouldn't have had any sympathy for him in terms of getting suspended. And it's just a reminder that, and it's again, like from a learning standpoint, like he had some moments of immaturity in these playoffs. And, the Naz Reid play was one, walking off without doing media was another one. Some of the other stuff that went on, walking off, I don't think the handshake thing is the end of the world, but it's not the best look to not shake hands at the end of the game, right? Like all those things, they're not crimes against humanity, but they are signs of a young guy that is going through this for the first time. And and it's just it's a reminder that he's 22 years old, right? And like he's 7'6", and he's an unbelievable player, and he's an unbelievable speaker, and he's going to be the face of the league, and he's extraordinarily competitive. And I think the NBA is in amazing hands with him going forward as the guy that's going to be the face of the league and somebody that people are going to really be captivated by, both good and bad, going forward. But it's also a reminder that he's a kid and kids make mistakes. And those are all, to go back to your earlier question, those are all part of the things that, from a learning standpoint, by the time the Spurs get back to this position again, whether it's next year or the year after or whenever, Victor and Spurs will all be much better for having gone through this. And it's a reminder that it was pretty good for the Knicks to get this one now, because there might not be a lot of opportunity to get some in the future against these guys.
Yeah, I mean, like you said earlier, the immaturity, or you didn't say this, but the immaturity played out in the biggest of spotlights. The spotlight on the NBA Finals is much different than it is on the Western Conference Finals, and so the perception that he left was one that would have that's much different than the one he would have left had they lost Game 7 in Oklahoma City. Which, by the way, I'm just curious. Do you think if Jalen Williams had played in that series or in Game 7 that we would have seen OKC in the finals?
I mean, I look. I think if AJ Mitchell and Jalen Williams were healthy, the Thunder would have been a much better team. But it doesn't matter, right?
No, I know it doesn't matter. I'm just curious as to what you think, because I actually think OKC would have beaten the Knicks.
I think if you go back and look through the season, the Thunder, the Knicks, and the Spurs were sort of a game of rock, paper, scissors, and the Spurs were consistently good against the Thunder. The Thunder, I think, were better than the Knicks, and the Knicks were consistently good against the Spurs. And there were some specific matchup things that benefited both the Knicks and the Spurs in those matchups that allowed them to have success. So, you know, the Thunder may well have won if Jalen was healthy. I picked them to win the series. I think they were the better team, but the Spurs on balance were better than them over the course of the season in that matchup, and they certainly were over the 7 games.
All right, 2 more. I loved the stuff that you wrote yesterday just about the importance to New York, because I think as a diehard sports fan, in thinking about these big cities with all of these teams, I often have conversations with friends or even on the air about what's most important. And I'm curious as to what you think about this championship that they just got and where it ranks among all-time New York titles. Giants, Yankees, Mets, Rangers. Where will this one rank all time?
I mean, it's going to rank really high. I mean, you know, it's probably right there with the Rangers winning in '94, because it was basically the same amount of time. That was a 54-year drought. This is a 53-year drought. You know, that Giants team beating the Patriots in 42, you know, to keep the Patriots being undefeated. That was an incredible
Super Bowl
championship.
42,
but yeah, Super Bowl 42. Sorry, but yeah, like, look, the Knicks. People that don't live in New York, and I'm sure our mutual friend Tony Kornheiser would agree with me on this. People that don't live in New York don't understand how big the Knicks are. And they sort of just assume the Yankees or maybe the Giants are the biggest team in New York, and they don't think about the fact that for basically the entire time those teams have existed, there's always been another team, right? Like there are tens of millions of people who are Jets fans, and there are tens of millions of people who are Mets fans or were Brooklyn Dodgers and New York Giants fans who grew up hating the Yankees, right? There's a lot of people who hate the Yankees or don't care about the Giants. Basically everybody within a 100-mile radius of New York City is a Knicks fan. You're talking tens of millions of people who only root for one basketball team. And so all of New York City is pretty much Knicks fans. And all the areas around New York City are pretty much Knicks fans. That's where you get for people who are from New York City and moved elsewhere, which there obviously are plenty of those people, right? So for all of those people who have rooted for this team that for stretches has been really, really good, but not good enough, like those 90s teams with Patrick Ewing had a couple really close calls and didn't win, and obviously had a ton of really good seasons and went deep in the playoffs and lost really competitive, heartbreaking series. Also won plenty of competitive, heartbreaking series for the other team, but, you know, ultimately never broke all the way through, made the finals twice and didn't win. And then had, you know, just an unbelievably awful 21 years where they were the worst franchise in the NBA by a mile and, you know, won, I think, 40% or less of their games and won 8 total playoff games in 21 years and had almost twice as many coaches in that time. And, you know, we're more known for embarrassing moments than they were any sort of success at all. Right. So to go from that to then what this team has become and winning this championship and doing it in the manner they did, like even if the Knicks went on to win another title next year in 2 or 3 years, right, it wouldn't be the same as
Right.
winning 15 of the final 16 games, winning 9 road playoff games in a row, beating the next face of the league in the NBA Finals in this unbelievably dramatic fashion, having this 29-point comeback at the Garden in Game 4 with this OG Anunoby shot that's going to go down as one of the iconic shots in the history of the NBA, let alone New York sports history, right? So all of that together, it just made for a very unbelievable and memorable scene for how it played out. And it produced some theater for the ages, and as good, even though it only went 5 games, that was as good a finals as you're ever going to see, because every game was awesome. Like even like Warriors Cavs, which is obviously a more impactful historical series. Most of the games in that series weren't very good. They were, they were great players playing, but they were a lot of 15, 20-point games in that series. These games all went down to the last minute. All were competitive till the end. All had crazy finishes in them in different ways. It was really incredible theater and an incredible product for the sport to have, and it really highlighted just how good the sport can be, and it sets up Victor Wembanyama now to have his redemption arc in the future, and I think fully cements him as the face of the league going forward.
All right, a week from tomorrow night, the NBA draft, different subject, but what do you think the Wizards do?
I'm not sure what they're going to do. They're going to take Darren Peterson or AJ DeBanza. I'm pretty certain. I don't know which way they'll go. I think there's pros and cons to either guy. I think Peterson's probably got a higher ceiling, and I would say DeBanza's probably got a higher floor, but both should be really good players. And, it's an opportunity for the Wizards to add another piece to the mix here. And then, I would presume they'll get a deal done with Trae Young and potentially with Anthony Davis this summer when they're extension eligible. We'll see how many wins that translates into next year, but they should be in position to, be a competitive team pushing for a playoff spot next year or more, if Trae and AD can stay on the court and if whoever they pick can have an impact for them.
I lied. One more. Let's just say Anthony Davis, because this is not the odds-on favorite, but let's just say he played 70-plus games next year and was healthy for the postseason. How many games would they win in the regular season, and how far could they go in the East?
It's hard to say right now on either of those, because a lot of that would be dependent on what else is going on around them. But they could be an above 500 team next year if that happened. Low to mid 40s probably. They still have a ton of young players. They still have a coach of Brian Keefe who I've known for a long time. I'm glad he's getting a year to try to win with some of the talent they now have, but has not been part of has not been a head coach for a playoff team yet. Whether they draft Peterson or DeBanza, they're going to be plenty involved. Rookies tend to not be hugely impactful from a win standpoint. You still have a lot of other young players that they're going to be playing a lot of minutes. So I would guess they'll make improvements in progress, but you're also going to have a lot more teams trying to be competitive too. So some of the win total numbers are going to be deflated from what you might normally think, because there's just not going to be, like this year there were 10 teams trying to lose for 2.5 months.
Yeah, right.
Like that's not going to happen anymore.
Yeah. Good point.
But I think it's reasonable to expect that if Trae Young and Anthony Davis are on the team and relatively healthy, that I think the Wizards will expect to be in the mix for a playoff spot. If they're not, it'll be a disappointment.
Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it always. Hope you're well.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having me. We'll talk soon.
Tim Bontemps, everybody from ESPN. Minicamp is underway. Got started just in this last hour. Dan Quinn has spoken. We'll tell you what he said. Also, Washington ranks top 5 for an available player. I'll tell you who that is when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Minicamp getting underway out in Ashburn, 3 days of it. We'll see if they go all three. They're scheduled for today, tomorrow, and Thursday. Dan Quinn did say everybody is there in some form today, except for the 4 players coming off end-of-season surgeries, Armstrong, Wise, Settle, and Trey Amos. But Bill Krosky, Merritt, Terry McLaurin, Antonio Williams, all there. He spoke a little earlier. We may have some sound for you before the end of the show. This segment of the show is brought to you by our good friends at Foley Mechanical. We had HVAC issues about 7 or 8 months ago. We called Dan Foley, who owns Foley Mechanical. He came out, dealt with me, my wife, figured out our problem. He owns 100% of the company. He doesn't franchise it out. He's not, part of a private equity takeover. He controls the quality from the equipment to the people he hires. His team, they're all professional. They're all sharp. They're all very skilled. This was really a first-rate operation. Foley Mechanical is full service, heating, air conditioning, hot water, and boilers. And they're the go-to for older homes with radiator heat, which is a real specialty. They work across the DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and they proudly install Amana HVAC equipment. If you're having any sort of issue with air conditioning, with heating, with hot water, with boilers, just call Foley Mechanical or go to FoleyMechanical.com and tell Dan that I told you to call. They'll take really good care of you. So CBSSports.com's Jordan Dejani, we've had Jordan on the show many times over the years, put out a story the other day about the best fits for Stefon Diggs. Now, we played some of the sound from Stefon Diggs yesterday. He was on with Channel 5 locally, and he has said all the right things about being interested in playing in D.C. and loving D.C., and this is his home, and wouldn't it be great if, he had a chance to play for the hometown team. Obviously, he went to good counsel, played for the great Bob Malloy and a great staff there, played at Maryland. And he has said all the right things. My personal view is that Stefon Diggs will end up getting a better opportunity and perhaps more money elsewhere. And when I say more money, it's not that Washington can't afford him. They can. But Terry McLaurin is the entrenched number one. There's still the Brandon Ayuk situation. And that may drag on. I don't think Stefon Diggs wants to go somewhere where he would end up being either, the second or third option. I think he wants to go somewhere where he is the number one option, which he has always been. He may also seek out a better contention situation, a team that's much closer perception-wise than Washington. We'll see. I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum, obviously, at this point. I would love it if Stefon Diggs played in Washington next year. I think he would be a tremendous help if he played at the level that he played at last year in New England. Now, all things being equal, and they're not, between Brandon Ayuk and Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs is actually eligible right now to sign with somebody. Brandon Ayuk is technically a member of the 49ers. Stefon Diggs played last year and played well. It's been 2 seasons since Brandon Ayuk played, essentially. Stefon Diggs actually appears to be of sound mind right now, whereas Brandon Ayuk doesn't seem to necessarily be with it right now. Now, it could all be some crazy strategy that he's playing, but all things being equal, if they were, I'd actually prefer Ayuk because there's much more of a long-term upside with Ayuk. But if you told me they went Diggs, I'd be fine with it. So Jordan Dejani ranked the top 5 landing spots for Stefon Diggs. Number 1 on his list, Washington. He writes, the Washington Commanders could use another wide receiver. Yeah, no kidding. Adam Peters drafted Clemson slot weapon Antonio Williams. He may end up being more than that. But it's fair to wonder if Jaden Daniels has enough talent at wideout to support another NFC championship run. Deebo Samuel's no longer with the team. He led the Commanders in receiving last year with 727 yards. That ranked 42nd in the NFL. Terry McLaurin put together the worst season of his career with 582 yards receiving in just 10 games as he struggled to stay healthy. If Washington wide receiver one, meaning Terry, has another season like that, the Commanders' passing attack is doomed. Diggs is also a DMV man and played his high school football 13 miles north of D.C. Is good counsel 13 miles north of D.C.? I don't know. Before starring at the University of Maryland. By the way, number 2 on the list for Stefon Diggs. Makes sense to me. Baltimore. Number 3, the Rams. Seriously. Number 4, the 49ers. And number 5, Denver. That's his list of the best possible landing spots for Stefon Diggs. By the way, I was looking at the list of like the best free agents that are still available. Stefon Diggs is on that list. Keenan Allen, we've talked about Keenan Allen before. He's on that list. I think Keenan Allen ends up back with the Chargers personally. 3 players from last year's Washington team are still perceived to be big name and perhaps significant contributing free agents who are still out there. Bobby Wagner, Deebo Samuel, and Von Miller. Then you have A.J. Epinesa. I actually really liked him during free agency, but he was injured, apparently. There was an injury there that scared some people off. He is still available out there. Cam Jordan is still available out there, as a pass rusher, as is Jadeveon Clowney and Joey Bosa. So there's still, Von Miller, Joey Bosa, Jadeveon Clowney, and Cam Jordan are all out there as, they would be specialty situational pass rushers. I think Joey Bosa would be so interesting. He played well last year. He's older, and he doesn't always stay healthy, but he was pretty good last year in Buffalo. Now, the injuries have always derailed him like they have with his brother. But, man, in terms of get-off quickness and speed, when he's healthy, he's up there. All right, something Dan Quinn said today when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. I was just talking to Max during the break. For whatever reason, I've always been a big Joey Bosa fan. I love Nick Bosa too. The problem with both of them has been availability, not ability. But I was looking up, Joey Bosa's out there. He's only 30 years old. He has played 10 years in the NFL, 9 of them with the Chargers, and then last year in Buffalo. And he has only played in 3 complete seasons, and yet's been to the Pro Bowl 5 times. He had last year, he had a season best for a pass rusher in 15 games, 5 forced fumbles. He's been a forced fumble machine during his career. He had 7 in 2021. And had 4. He's got 22 forced fumbles in his career, which basically, let's see how many games he's actually played in, because he's missed so many games. 122 games. 122 games. So this guy's averaging, a forced fumble, basically every 5 games. Every, 6 games. Always loved Joey Bosa. I don't know why. Just always thought, man, he is really, really scary as an edge rusher. I mean, his speed has always been incredible. So he's sitting out there. I don't know what his health is. This was Dan Quinn just in the last hour out at Minicamp, talking about signing available free agents.
Yeah, and man, we were glad we signed Vaughn. Like he brought a lot to our team, the knowledge, the intensity. So we'd been visiting with him, through the spring, and had chances to visit with him. So that was more ongoing, than just that time. But when it comes time for what do they add, the value do they bring to the team? What does that look like? How would they feature in a role? So it's not surprising for a team going through different stages to say, okay, they've gone through a spring, where are they? And even into training camp sometimes, where that could change for a certain veteran who can bring a certain specific skill set to a team, and finding that right fit's a big piece of it.
Max, you got to tell me what the question was going in. What was the question? It sounded like he was answering a question about Von Miller.
Yeah, so they referenced Von Miller signing last year and how it helped the team and all that. They haven't been giving the mic out, so it's been very hard to get question audio. So it's bad for
Will you
radio.
play the answer again? Because I actually, you're right. You said to me during the break, it kind of dovetails from what you were talking about with some of the available free agents. Because given the amount of money Washington has, forget about Ayuk. We know that that's in play, or Diggs or whatever. But some of these other guys could be in play too, especially if they end up, having a need, an unexpected need. Let's hope that's not the case. But just play that answer. I want to hear what he said again.
Yeah, and man, we were glad we signed Vaughn. Like he brought a lot to our team, the knowledge, the intensity. So we'd been visiting with him, through the spring, and had chances to visit with him. So that was more ongoing, than just that time. But when it comes time for what do they add, the value do they bring to the team? What does that look like? How would they feature in a role? So it's not surprising for a team going through different stages to say, okay, they've gone through a spring, where are they? And even into training camp sometimes, where that could change for a certain veteran who can bring a certain specific skill set to a team, and finding that right fit's a big piece of it.
Look, I hope that, the additions of Owe and Chenal and, Amenahue, and the return of Armstrong and the return of Wise and Chason, etc. I hope we don't get to, August 24th or whatever, or August 15th, and have a need for a pass rusher, given how much money they spent on their defense, how many new players they added on their defense. But there are some intriguing guys out there, if they ended up being in that spot. Now, of course, we're all focused on offensively, wide receiver in particular, and it's Diggs, Allen, and Ayuk. I mean, that's kind of the list at this point. I've already talked about Keenan Allen, but I'll just repeat what I've said about Keenan Allen. I've always been a fan of Keenan Allen's, and he is an exceptional route runner. He is a pro's pro. He would be another massive addition to the locker room in terms of culture. He's always been one of the most respected, one of the most well-liked players. And let's face it, the dude just doesn't drop balls. He is a contested catch guy, but at his age now, he's never been a separator. He's never been a deep threat to begin with. He's a possession receiver. And I would bet they actually have some thoughts that somebody like Treylon Burks could become somebody like Keenan Allen. I mean, that would be the dream, obviously. This was Dan Quinn on Jaden Daniels pushing the offense right now.
Yeah, I think it forces the other players to elevate quickly too, knowing that like he's really on his game. So when we check a play, we work different cadences, different personnel groups, like they better have their space in order because they can count on he and Marcus, in that same space. So having the two of them really pushing tempos and pushing people into that spot, it's absolutely like a hidden advantage for us. The players this time of year is like so important for their skill work. How can they develop a certain part of an option route, a certain part of something? So that piece is a big part of their springs to elevate what part of their game they want to work heading into camp. So it's like this giant ramp up in a way geared towards a month from now.
Dan Quinn, I say this every year, this time of year, OTAs, minicamp, and even, much of training camp. Really, really hard to have any major takeaways. You'll read people doing play-by-play, bless their hearts. The thing you think you keep your fingers crossed on is that nobody gets hurt. Nobody gets hurt. And then you just listen to the coaches to see if there's any tells. Occasionally there are, probably more during training camp. But yeah, CBS Sports also, I just happened to have been, reading a lot of what they put out here over the last few days on the NFL. And they actually summarized the entire free agency period. There's more to go, but Washington spent the third most amount of money in free agency. The Raiders spent a little bit more, and the Titans spent a little bit more. They were 1-2. Washington was 3 in overall aggregate spend. And then in terms of the new players or just the free agents signed, which would include some of their own, no one even close to the number that Washington signed in free agency. Washington, if you total it all up, including some of their own, 28 free agents signed since the signing period began back in early March. No other team even close to that. The Titans signed 20 free agents. Obviously, much of Washington's emphasis free agency-wise was focused on defense. All right, that'll do it for today. Nick Ashu's in for Chris again. Stay tuned for that. I'll be back tomorrow.